Most men who fast are doing it wrong, not because their technique is off, but because they have no idea what they're actually doing or why. They skip a meal, they feel hungry, they feel spiritual for about 20 minutes, and then they eat something and wonder why nothing changed. Now, I've been there. I fast occasionally, but honestly, I could not tell you why. I never made it long enough to actually find out what fasting does. I always quit before it got real, before the flesh actually got uncomfortable enough for something to shift or to change. And here's what I've realized: most men treat fasting like a diet with a religious label on it. But that is not what fasting is. Fasting is a weapon, one of the most powerful tools that God gave men for spiritual warfare. And most of us have never actually picked it up. So here's the first thing you need to understand about fasting, and that changes everything. Jesus did not say if you fast, he said when you fast. In Matthew 6, verse 16 to 17, it says, "And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, and their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you that they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face." And when, not if. Jesus assumed that his followers would fast. He gave instructions on how to do it right. He did not make it optional, he made it expected. And before he started his public ministry, before he preached a single sermon or performed a single miracle, he fasted for 40 days. Not as a warm-up exercise, but as preparation, as a declaration that his flesh would not be running his mission. If Jesus needed to fast before the most important work in human history, then you probably need to fast before the work that God has called you to do. But here's what fasting actually is doing that most men never understand. Fasting is not primarily about food. Food is just the most accessible thing that the flesh clings to. So fasting is about establishing dominance over your flesh in the most direct way possible. Think about it. Every day that your flesh tells you what to do, it tells you when to eat, when to stop, what feels good, what you deserve, what you need right now. And most men obey that without even thinking about it. The flesh says hungry, and you eat. The flesh says tired, and you check out. The flesh says bored, and you start scrolling. Fasting is the moment you look your flesh directly in the face and say no. Not because you hate food, but because you are establishing who you actually are and who is in charge. In Romans 8 verse 13 it says, "For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live." Put to death the deeds of the body. Fasting is one of the most direct ways a man does exactly that. You are literally training your body to submit to your spirit instead of the other way around. And here's most men completely miss out about why fasting produces spiritual power. See, when you deny the flesh, it creates a space. Space that was previously filled with food, entertainment, or scrolling and comfort. And that space becomes available for God to fill, to enter. The hunger you feel during a fast is not just physical, it becomes spiritual. Your body's craving or crying out loud for food, and slowly that cry redirects towards God. That desperation, that genuine need, is exactly the posture that unlocks prayer. Matthew 17, verse 21. In many manuscripts, Jesus tells his disciples about a particular stubborn demonic situation, saying, "But this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting." Prayer and fasting, not just prayer, not just fasting, but both together, because some battles require a level of spiritual intensity that comfortable men simply cannot access. Okay, the fasting is what gets you there. The disciples had been trying to drive out this demon and have been failing. And Jesus tells them the reason is not a lack of faith alone, it is a lack of the kind of desperate, focused prayer that fasting produces. So, fasting strips away the comfort and forces a dependence on God, a dependence that you cannot manufacture in any other way. Now, let's be real about what the flesh will throw at you when you actually try this. For me personally, food is comfort. When I'm stressed, bored, or feeling purposeless, I eat. Okay? It is one of the fastest ways that I quiet my discomfort. And fasting goes directly after that coping mechanism, right? It removes the comfort and forces you into actually sit in whatever you are, or wherever you were, eating to avoid, okay? The phone and social media are the same thing in a different form. Boredom hits and the phone fills it instantly. So fasting from food while still scrolling for hours, it's not really fasting. You're just kind of swapping the one flesh for another habit. Isaiah 58 verse 6 says, "Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of wickedness, to undo the straps of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke." Break every yoke. That is what God says genuine fasting does. It's not a spiritual performance, not a hunger for its own sake. A genuine, like, stripping away of what the flesh clings to, so that God can actually break what has had power over you. The yokes in your life, the patterns you cannot seem to break, the temptations that keep winning, the areas where you feel spiritually stuck. Fasting is one of God's designed tools for breaking them. But it has to be real. It has to actually cost you something. So what does actually doing this look like practically for a man who has never made it long enough to find out what fasting does? Start smaller than you think you need to. Most of us are not going to start 40 days. Try one meal. Skip breakfast. Use that time when you would have been eating for prayer and scripture instead of scrolling. That is a fast. Simple, accessible, and real. And then build. Maybe skip 2 meals. Then a full day. And every time hunger hits you, and it will hit you hard, don't reach for your phone or another distraction. Just try to sit in it. Pray into it. Let the discomfort become a conversation with God instead of something that you immediately try to medicate with something else. Joel 2 verse 12 says, "Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning." Return to me with fasting. Fasting is described here as an act of returning to God, okay, or reorienting yourself towards Him. It's a way of saying with your body, what your mouth is saying in prayer, right? You're physically acting that towards Him. That you need more of Him. You need more comfort. And Daniel 10 verse 3 shows us that what sustained fasting actually produces. It says, "I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine, entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for full 3 weeks. And at the end of the fast, an angel shows up with the message directly from God saying that Daniel's prayer was heard from the first day he began to humble himself. Heard from the first day. The fast was not what moved God, the humility was. The fasting is one of the most direct ways a man humbles himself before God, in his body, not just in his words. So here's the truth I want you to take from this. You fast occasionally, but you don't really know why. Most men are in that exact place. They do it vaguely, inconsistently, without understanding what it actually is at stake. But fasting is not a religious ritual. It is a declaration that your flesh does not run your life, that God has access to the space that you usually fill with comfort, that you are serious enough about what you're asking for and who you are becoming to actually pay physical price for it. Okay? The men in scripture who moved mountains prayed and fasted. The men who saw breakthroughs prayed and fasted. Jesus himself prepared for the most important work in history by fasting. So start this week, just one meal. Use that time for prayer instead of anything else. And find out for yourself what happens when you finally make it long enough to let it get real. Now, if this resonated with you guys, please share with another man who has been treating fasting like an optional religious exercise. And if you want to keep building this community of men, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And let me know, have you ever fasted seriously, or have you always quit before it got uncomfortable? See you guys in the next one.